Welcome back to another episode of Local Search Tuesdays. This week I'm sharing some awesome new info about local SEO because I'm sharing the first half of my epic double session presentation from Digital Dealer in Las Vegas. You know the drill. When I share presentations, these videos are a lot longer. So let's get to it. Welcome to the Goonies Guide to Automotive SEO, how to dominate local search results in 2022. If any of you have seen me speak before, you know that the generic title slide's not really my style. So if we're talking about the Goonies, let's switch to a Goonies title slide. For those of you that haven't seen me speak before, I am Greg Gifford. I'm the Vice President of Search at SearchLab, a boutique digital marketing agency that serves dealers all over the United States. The important thing here is I want you to check out my weekly video series called Local Search Tuesdays. I release a video every Tuesday morning at our blog. You can go to the link right there and see those videos. They're short 3 to 5 minute clips that tell you how to get better visibility in local searches. And also for those of you that don't know, I speak at a lot of conferences. I've been speaking at automotive conferences for over 10 years, and I speak at a lot of conferences outside of automotive. In fact, last year when COVID hit and all of the live events got shut down, I already had 28 conferences booked in 8 different countries. So I'm all over the place, and I see a lot of really bad presenters at some of these conferences. You know, it's the guys that stand right behind the podium that's on the stage, and they have their back to the crowd because they're turned around just reading the slides behind them. And even worse, usually the background of the slide is just white with black Arial font and lots of bullet points. So because of that, I firmly believe that bullet points kill kittens, and today's presentation will be entirely kitten safe. And every time I do a presentation, I like to share my love of movies along with my love of talking about SEO. I'm ridiculously obsessed with movies. I was a film major in college. I have a full sleeve of movie portrait tattoos on my arm. My entire right leg is sleeved with Goonies tattoos. So we've got that Goonies reference today. Every time I do a presentation, there's a movie theme to go along with my presentation. And today's theme is comedy movies. And because we've got a double presentation, I've got a lot of time to spend today. We have 210 references to comedy movies, including at least one comedy movie for every year in the last 50 years. And we've got 36 movies from 1985, which was the golden year for American film comedy. And I know some of you won't have seen some of the movies, maybe even a lot of the movies, especially the older ones. So there is attribution over to the side. So not only are you going to learn some awesome stuff about how to get your dealership more visible in local searches, you're going to have a lot of awesome movies to go watch later. So let's get it going. Why the long face? Are you spending too much time looking up at competitors that rank higher in local searches? It's really frustrating, isn't it? I know a lot of times you might even feel like you're clueless about SEO, but today I'm here to help. And I speak at a lot of conferences. I know a lot, and I don't want to seem like I've got a huge head with its own gravity system, but I have a lot of awesome information and tactics to share with you today. And unlike some other speakers that you may have seen in the past, I'm not going to talk out of my ass. I've got awesome, really helpful tips to share today that will make a definite difference in your visibility in local searches. But keep in mind, there's no miracle pill when it comes to SEO. You have to spend the time, you have to spend the effort, you have to know what you're doing. It's very intensive. But if you follow all of the tips that I share with you today, you'll be able to make your sites as visible and as awesome as the Flying Elvises. And just like a fat guy in a little coat, I got a lot of stuff to squeeze in. In fact, I have 243 slides that I have to squeeze in just under 2 hours. So let's get this going. It's been crazy lately. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. We had COVID. That kind of killed things last year. Then because of COVID and the things related to the lockdowns and restrictions, we had a chip shortage. And that chip shortage has made it really hard to get inventory to sell to customers. So the automotive business has been pretty wacky for the last year and a half. In fact, I've got a graph that shows what the average traffic looks like for most dealers over the last year and a half. We started in 2019 and things were going up, and then COVID hit, and then it dipped, and then we had the recovery, and then the chip shortage just made things go kind of wonky and all over the place. And now we're here in October of 2021, and things are starting to look up again, even though we may not have the inventory we want to have. But because of the craziness and the results of how it's changed user behavior and customers are looking for things differently, and every sale starts with a search, more than ever, your dealership needs SEO to win. And unfortunately, the old strategies and tactics, they don't work anymore, even though a lot of people are still using them. Because we know that today, in the post-COVID landscape, like I just mentioned, every sale starts with a search. Everyone is going to get online to figure out what they're going to buy and where they're going to buy from. So it's time to change the way that you think about search engine optimization. SEO is actually your dealership's most important marketing channel. It's more important than everything else. If you look at Google Analytics, you get more traffic and more leads from organic visits in Google than from every other lead source combined, unless you spend a whole lot of money on paid search. So that just means you need to nurture that most important marketing channel. And we have a weird situation in automotive where we have these OEM approved vendors where a third party vets vendors and says, these are the people you're allowed to use. But that OEM approved vendor program is not in your best interest. It does not help your dealership, because those OEM approved vendors, once they get into the program, they're locked into specific packages and they cannot deviate. They have to offer the exact same service and the exact same tactics and the exact same package to every dealer that signs up. And once you get in the OEM programs, it's all about volume. And that results in ridiculously overloaded teams. The people that work in these programs typically handle 20, 30, 40 plus. In fact, there's a lot of OEM approved vendors that have 80 to 100 clients a month that they're responsible for with SEO. And that means they're not spending any time. And even worse, once you get into the program, you have to work with any dealer that wants to sign up with you, which means there are million situations where the guy that's doing SEO for you is also doing SEO for your competitor. And even worse, they have to provide the exact same service to everyone. Once you get into that OEM approved program, you're locked into the packages that you're providing, and you have to provide the same service to every dealership that you work with. What does that result in? That means, hey, if you're a Ford dealer in Dallas, you're getting exactly the same SEO service as a Ford dealer in the middle of nowhere in Wyoming. Or on the flip side, if you're a Ford dealer in the middle of nowhere in Wyoming, you're getting the same exact SEO service as a Ford dealer in Dallas. And that doesn't make sense, because those are two vastly different situations that need vastly different tactics and strategies. So if you're getting the exact same cookie cutter stuff, regardless of who you're using and regardless of who you are and regardless of where you're located, how's that good for your dealership? If you want to win in today's digital landscape, you need a customized SEO strategy that's going to look at your dealership and your location and your potential customers and your competition and your business goals. And then it's a strategy that matches all of those and is the best path forward. The OEM approved providers, in fact, not only are they locked into the same strategies, they're using the same strategies that they've been using since they got into the program, which in a lot of cases means they're using the same tried and true tactics, even though they may not be very effective, that they've been using for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. Even though Google releases thousands of updates every year, these guys are not updating their tactics because, again, once you're in the program, you're locked in and you can't change. So it's time to change the way you think about choosing an SEO provider. You've got to stop choosing your SEO provider by who's the cheapest. And I get it. SEO is hard to understand. There's a lot of stuff that's behind the scenes. We're going to talk about a lot of this today. But just because you don't understand it doesn't mean you just opt for the cheapest option. Because we just talked about the fact that this is your most important marketing channel. You're going to get more traffic and more leads from organic visits from Google than every other lead source combined. So why would you go with the cheapest option? You need to nurture your biggest chance for growing your dealership. And you need to stop choosing providers by who you can co-op, because the entire co-op system either requires you to use one of the OEM approved vendors or strongly suggests that you use one of the OEM approved vendors. And we just talked about a bunch of reasons why the OEM approved vendors aren't in your best interest. So who cares if you're using co-op money and it's effectively free for your dealership if you're getting the same BS service and BS tactics that everyone else is getting, and you know it's not going to be effective. It's actually more expensive to pick the cheapest option that you can co-op as opposed to picking someone that's actually going to be able to help. You've got to stop buying that 45-year-old beat up Ford Pinto and expecting a souped up Mercedes. You're just not going to get it. You get what you pay for when it comes to SEO. And while it's not exactly like lawyers where, hey, every time you pick up the phone or every time you do an email, you get charged more. SEO doesn't work exactly like that, but it's a lot more like a lawyer than it is like a software product. When you're buying SEO, you're buying hours. You're buying butts and seats sitting there doing the work. So if you're paying for really cheap SEO, that means you're either paying for people that don't know what they're doing, or more likely, you're paying for people that just aren't spending any time trying to make a difference in your visibility. And the thing that you really need as a car dealer is something called local SEO. It's a more specific subset of SEO that targets Google's local algorithm. And I've been talking about local SEO at automotive conferences and events for over a decade. Yet, even though I've been talking about it multiple times a year at multiple automotive events, most dealers still don't know what local SEO is. Now, here's the really scary thing. When you use these OEM approved providers, or most of the providers in automotive that do SEO, they're doing regular SEO or traditional SEO. They're not doing local SEO. They're doing out of the box SEO that you read about online. They're not doing the extra things that matter for local visibility. Now, there is some overlap in the signals that matter between the two algorithms, but as an auto dealer, you really need local because local's better. If we were going to draw a Venn diagram to show the signals that mattered for traditional SEO versus local SEO, it would look something like this. So traditional SEO is the yellow circle, local SEO is the blue circle. So if you're getting SEO from someone that does traditional SEO, whether it's an automotive SEO vendor or a local SEO vendor, and they're somebody in your own town or whatever that might be, they're putting forth effort that is included in the yellow circle. Now, local SEO is what you actually need, and I'll explain that a bit more in a second here. So if you're getting traditional SEO of all the stuff that you're paying for and all the effort that's being put forth to get you better visibility, only that bit there in green, that's the only part that's really helping you. The rest of it is frivolous and doesn't do much for you. Where if you are working with a vendor that understood local SEO, 100% of everything that they were doing would matter and help your visibility. It's important to understand that there are multiple algorithms at place. So when you do a search, Google's going to try to figure out the intent of what that user is looking for. They're trying to figure out the best answer to the question that user is asking when they enter a search phrase. And Google's local algorithm includes additional signals that the traditional algorithm doesn't include, which means it's more complex because you have to do more, you have to consider more. If we really strip Google down to the most basic concept, Google's really just very advanced pattern detection. Google's going to assess the pattern of various signals, both on your site and off your site, to determine whether your site is a good answer to the question that the searcher is asking. So if we really think about it, Google's just pattern detection, which means SEO is just giving you a better pattern so you look more attractive to Google, and it's more obvious to Google that you're the best answer to the question that the searcher is asking. So as an auto dealer, you actually need local SEO. Now, again, I've been talking about this for years, and a lot of people still don't even know what it is. So you might be saying, well, geez, dude, how do we know that you're telling us the truth and you're not just trying to sell us stuff? Well, it's really easy to check what I'm saying, because any searches related to purchasing a vehicle or getting service or getting parts, anything related to auto dealers is automatically localized. Here's an example. I did a search for Ford dealer. I did not enter a phrase that locked it down to a particular area, whether that's a city, a neighborhood, a county, or a phrase like near me or nearby. Like you can see right there, I just typed in Ford dealer. And when I did this search, I was just north of Dallas in Plano, Texas. So you can see it's constraining the search results to things that are nearby. It's showing me the 3 Ford dealers that are closest to my physical location in the real world when I did that search. Because Google understands that when I do a search related to anything that a car dealer can help answer, Google understands I need local results. If I'm going to buy a car, I want to buy that car from a local dealership. So Google's going to show local results, which means you need local SEO. It's also important to understand, if we're talking about this local algorithm that includes additional signals, where do those search results get displayed when I do that search in Google? The most obvious answer is when you do a search for a particular keyword phrase and you see what we call the map pack, where it's the map and the 3 results underneath. That is Google's local algorithm at play. That is the clearest indication that the local algorithm is being used. And that is a very clear indicator that, hey, this particular search query has local intent, so the local algorithm is being used. Now, at the bottom, you can click that button that says View All. Now, the map pack on desktop is going to show 3 results. Lately on mobile, they've pared it back, and now only 2 results. But in either spot, you can click View All and see more than just the top 2 or 3. That takes you to what we call the local finder page. On the local finder page, we see even more. So it goes beyond the top 3 and shows you every search result that is relevant to the search query that you entered. Customers or users could also go directly to Google Maps. And if they do that search inside of Google Maps, that is also utilizing Google's local algorithm. Now, something that I always like to point out here, if you do the search in Google Maps, notice the radius of the search here versus the radius of the search when I go to the local finder off of the original 3-pack. When I go to the local finder, it's a much wider radius. In this case, again, I'm north of Dallas, so it's showing me the entire Dallas area. Whereas when I search directly in Google Maps, it's a much more constrained search radius. It's centering in on the northeastern area of the Dallas Metroplex, because that's where I actually am in the real world when I do this search. So when you do a search in Google Maps, that search radius is going to be a little bit tighter versus the search radius in the local finder page, which will be a much wider radius. But below that map pack, when you've got the map and the 3 results, you see the quote unquote standard 10 blue links. That's Google's organic search results. But in this case, it's not the regular organic search results, because even below the map pack, those search results are still localized. So all of these search results are still going to be constrained to my particular geographic area. Those are all of the locations where Google's local search algorithm returns results. Now, when the local search algorithm returns results, it's going to rank those results based on 3 factors: relevance, prominence, and proximity. And let me explain what those elements are. Relevance is Google is going to look at the search query that you entered and say, all right, which websites are websites that this user is looking for? So does this website include all the attributes that the searcher is searching for? In other words, if I'm looking for a car dealer, it's going to return a list of all of the car dealers. It's not going to show me a dry cleaner. It's not going to show me a restaurant. It's not going to show me a plastic surgeon, because those aren't car dealers. So if I'm looking for something that's related to a car dealer, it's first going to pick out a list of search results based on relevance, which means it's going to give me a list of all of the car dealers in my immediate area. Then it's going to sort that list based on prominence factors, which means which of these websites stand out from the other sites that are in that list. This is where Google's algorithm comes into play. It's very easy to detect, hey, is this a car dealership or not? Or is this a restaurant or not? Or a dry cleaner or not? Or a plumber or not? Once it comes up with that list, it has to sort that list based on prominence. And that's where Google's pattern detection kicks in. And it says, this is most likely the best answer to the question that the searcher is asking. And that's where regular SEO stops. But with local SEO, we've got an additional factor of proximity. How far are these search results from the person doing the search? And this is something that's really interesting. So if we try this search for a car dealership and you try this from your office at the dealership, many times you're going to rank number one automatically in the map pack because the proximity is 0. You're a car dealership, so you're relevant. You're going to be prominent because you're searching from your own location, and proximity is going to be 0 because you're searching from your own location. So you search from the office and you rank number one in the map pack, but you live 30 or 40 minutes away and you search from home, and all of a sudden your dealership doesn't show up anymore. And you freak out thinking that SEO is broken or it's not working anymore, or there was some drastic change and you got penalized, but that's not actually the case. What really happened here is when you search in the dealership, proximity is 0. If you live 40 minutes away, if it's a more crowded market, it's pretty likely that there are other dealerships that are closer to your physical location when you do that search from home. So they might displace you by a few slots. That doesn't mean that SEO quit working. It just means that the proximity factor is no longer in your favor. So one of the things I like to do is give you some tools to go back to the office and talk to your boss and say, hey, look, we've been doing SEO, but we've been doing it wrong. Here's the way we need to do it. And you can come back from Digital Dealer, or you could be watching the recording here and saying, hey, this is great. But if you have some tools to talk to your boss to say, this is great, and here's why, it makes it a little bit easier for you to plead your case. So the first thing that I like to share is an easy way to help demonstrate how local SEO works. And that's with a few searches for the phrase pizza delivery. If you do the search pizza delivery, just those 2 words at the office, you're going to get a list of all the pizza delivery spots right by the dealership. But then if you drive home and you live fairly far away, you type the same 2 words and you get totally different results. Most people don't think much about that. But in reality, if you think about it, you type the same phrase in twice and get completely different search results. And that's because Google understands that you need something nearby to your current physical location. Now, there are videos throughout the presentation where I know that I'm trying to squeeze in as much as I can to be as helpful as possible. But sometimes people want to know a little bit more about particular subjects. So when there's a video from my weekly video series that dives a little bit more in depth into a particular topic, I'm going to include links here. I do want to point out, as I include video links, there are always thumbnails to the video so that you know, hey, look, this is a video. It says watch this. So, hey, look, it's pretty darn obvious. But the important thing is I've made short links so that it's easy to figure out where to go. If you're somebody that's writing notes, make sure that you write these down in lowercase because they are case sensitive. If you try to type that in capitals, it wouldn't work. So this example with pizza delivery explains how local SEO works. Then you want to take the next step and use simple math to explain why SEO is necessary. And you definitely want to watch this video because I don't have enough time to dive into it. But at a simple level, let's say that in your town, there were 5 franchise dealers and 15 independent dealers. That gives us 20 dealerships in your town. On page 1 of Google, you've got 10 blue links. Then you've got the 3 links that are included in the map pack, which gives us 13 possible spots to show up. But we're going to have Auto Trader and Car Gurus and Cars.com and some aggregate sites in there. So once we take out the aggregates from the 13 possible slots, most likely you've got 7 or 8 spots that a dealership could, in reality, show up in on page 1. But if we've got 20 dealerships in town and there's only 8 spots on page 1, that means 12 people don't show up on page 1. And there's only 10 spots on page 2, which means 2 of those dealerships are going to be all the way back on page 3 where no one's going to see them. So it's really important to do SEO to make sure that you're showing up at the top of the list and you have that visibility. And most of you are probably in denser markets, more crowded, more competition, which means there's way more than 20 dealerships you're fighting with because you've got to include all the independents. And when we're talking about fixed ops terms, you're not only fighting against other dealerships, you're fighting against all the Jiffy Lubes and lube shops and mechanics in town. So in some cases, there might be 100, 150, 200, even 250 dealerships or other businesses fighting for visibility when there might only be 7 or 8 spots on page one. And that's why you've got to do SEO. And it's really important to pay attention to an annual study called the Local Search Ranking Factors Study. So this is a study done every year by a company called Whitespark that is a local SEO toolset. And what they do is they send a pretty complex survey out to the top 35 to 40 experts worldwide in local SEO, because nobody knows exactly what goes into the algorithm. But if you talk to the top experts that are doing things every day and testing things every day and working with clients every day, they have a pretty good idea of, hey, if I tweak this dial over here, it's going to make a difference in visibility. So while if you put 5 SEOs in a room and have them optimize a site, they're all going to optimize it differently. There's going to be a lot of overlap in the elements that they optimize. So in this case, if you send a pretty advanced survey out to all of the top experts in local SEO, you're going to get a pretty good feel for which signals matter the most for local search visibility. Now, I have put this link on here, but at the time of recording, this post is not up yet. Now, the reason I've got the link here a little bit early is because I know the guy that runs this study, and we actually just filled out this survey a couple of weeks ago at the date of recording this video, which is the first week of October, because I am one of the top 35 people in the world. So I've been one of the contributors to this study for several years now. So because of the fact that I know the guy that runs the study and I'm friends with him, I got the results of the study early. This link will not work until the second week of October. So don't come to this link until I'm recording this on October 5th or 6th. Come to this a week later, and this link is going to work by the end of that next week. But I do have the results early, so I can show you once we've got this study. We do have a nice pie chart that shows all of the signals that matter for showing up in Google Maps or in that map pack. And we've got another pie chart that shows all the signals that matter for showing up in localized organic. The local search ranking factor study is basically the local search Bible. It shows you exactly what you need to do. It shows you all of the signals that matter the most for local search visibility. So if you're doing your own SEO, this is your guide to show you exactly what you need to do to get more visibility next year. And if you're working with a vendor or a vendor partner that handles your SEO for you, this is your guide to help you understand what it is that they either are doing or should be doing, so you can have a better understanding of how their processes work and what they're doing is going to benefit your dealership. Or you can use the local search ranking factor study to help hold your vendors accountable. Now, before I dive into the specific factors that we're going to talk about for the rest of the presentation that are all in that study, I need to talk about the really big update that came out recently. Now, Google typically rolls out thousands of updates a year, but whenever there's an update that's going to significantly affect a lot of search results, Google is always going to announce it ahead of time so that people have time to prepare for that update. And this recent update was called the Page Experience Update. And this Page Experience Update incorporated core web vitals, which are signals we've been talking about for a few years now, and customer experience signals. So instead of penalizing you or giving you benefit for one or two things here or there, this update was all about what the user experience is like if someone is using their cell phone to look at your website and how that experience works for them. So talking about the core web vitals, there are 3 important factors that you need to understand. Number 1, LCP stands for largest contentful paint. That is the biggest element that needs to be rendered on the page above the fold. So we're not talking about on your homepage, whatever the biggest thing there is, whether it's a big video or a big image, it's the biggest thing above the fold. So when your site first loads, it may not necessarily be your slideshow. It could be the heading on the page. It could be text on the page. It depends on what the biggest element is on the page. Now, Google's very generic suggestion that applies to everything online says you want to target 2.5 seconds or faster. But we know when it comes to automotive websites, you need a big, gorgeous photo, or perhaps a slideshow, or perhaps a video. You're going to have something at the top of the page. It's going to take a little bit more time to render. If you're more than 2.5 seconds, is that really bad? No. Realistically, shoot for 6 seconds or faster. As long as you're at 5.5, 6 seconds, shaving off a second or two or going from 6 seconds down to 2.5 seconds isn't going to make squat worth a difference. So just shoot for about 5 or 6 seconds and then you're going to be fine. The next big important element of Core Web Vitals is FID, first input delay. Basically, it's a fancy way of saying, how long do I have to wait as a user once I've clicked on something for something to happen with your website? So if your menu loads pretty quickly and I click on a button, but then nothing happens for a second or two, that's first input delay. So you want everything to be as interactive as possible, as quickly as possible. Google says target 100 milliseconds, which is 1/10 of a second. That's a pretty good target. You don't want people to wait even 1/2 second. And while 1/2 second seems pretty fast, if you're using a mobile phone or a smartphone to look at a website and there's a 1/2 second delay between clicking on something and something happening, that's a pretty darn big delay. The last one is CLS, cumulative layout shift. That's how much visual shift, and obviously I said visual because I can't type, but how much visual shift there is during page load. So if, for instance, as the page loads, you have a slideshow at the top of the page and the second image in your slideshow isn't sized correctly, so it's larger on the vertical axis, then as the page loads, it loads the first image. And then as the page continues to load, your slideshow switches to the second image, which is taller vertically, which then pushes all the text further down the page. But then it goes to your third image, which is back to the standard size, and it shrinks the content and the content moves again. So as I'm now trying to read the text on your page, that text is moving around as the page loads. That is layout shift. And you want the littlest possible layout shift that you can see on the site as the site loads. And then this update was also about customer experience signals. So we need to worry about mobile friendliness. That means how easy is it to use your site on a mobile device? Is the site responsive? Is it hard to click on things because your buttons are too close together? And in fact, in today's world, you must be on a responsive website. And this is a big problem because mainly dealer.com chose Betamax over VHS years ago and went with what is called adaptive, which means there's a separate code base for the mobile site from the desktop site. It's not responsive. It does not work as well. And the technology that's behind your website, the technology that drives your website really does matter when it comes to SEO. And I hate to trash on a particular vendor. We can get results with anybody, but hey, if you're trying to be aggressive on SEO, why not be on the best website platform possible? So we had a situation where we had a group of dealerships and the owners of the dealership decided they wanted every dealership in the group to be on the same website platform. And because they had one dealer that was on dealer.com because they were Subaru and that was all they were allowed to do through the OEM, they decided to make every dealership be on dealer.com. So here are a couple of examples where dealers switched from other website platforms that are much better, cough, cough, dealer inspire, cough, cough, dealer on, and they switched to dealer.com. Now, we were working with them, so we did all the things that we should have done. We transferred all the content, we set up 301 redirects, we did everything we could to mitigate the loss, but because the technology behind the platform is bad and they're not responsive sites and there's things that just don't work on dealer.com, you can see right there how much visibility they lost in search engines when they switched over to dealer.com. It's also important to have safe browsing. Obviously, nobody wants to click to a website that's been hacked and has all kinds of porn links and Viagra links in it. HTTPS is also important. This is that security certificate that protects all transmitted information. And that seems kind of silly because most of us switched over to HTTPS years ago, but you'd be surprised how many dealerships are still out there that do not have HTTPS installed. Cough, cough, dealer.com has this happen fairly often. Also, the other thing, intrusive interstitials. This is a really fancy way of saying annoying pop-ups. Think about what happens when you browse the internet, especially when you're on a mobile phone. If there's a pop-up that happens automatically, you just close that pop-up because it's in the way. Now, I know dealers love to have these chat pop-ups and social pop-ups, and you think that they convert. But if you really pay attention, the vast majority of your potential customers are closing those out, especially when they're just landing on your site and they know nothing about you. They're not going to go ahead and chat. They need to see what's going on with that VDP or with that service page or with that About Us page or with that homepage first. So those pop-ups now will cause a visibility penalty when it comes to Google. So don't have the annoying pop-ups that happen automatically. Another big update that happened very recently, Google is now starting to show much more information related to features and specs and trim levels of vehicles in search results. Here's a screen capture where you search for 2022 Honda Pilot and you get all kinds of top line information that you used to have to go to a website to see. So if I'm just looking for how much does a Pilot cost and what trim levels do I have an option for, I don't have to go to your dealership website anymore. Google is now showing that information in Google search results. And while you might complain and say that's not fair, Google's trying to steal my traffic, in reality, at this point in the buying process, this user doesn't need to go to a website to see this. This is freely available information that's on multiple websites. So Google is serving that information up. So we also know in that automotive buying process, it's a long process and people are going to shop around. They're going to look at multiple websites before they either call you or fill out a form or start an online chat. In fact, Google research has shown that customers now will visit a dealership website or multiple dealership websites 27 times before they submit a lead. That means there are 27 website visits, either to one individual dealership or to multiple dealerships, before that user actually fills out a lead form, a chat form, or calls that dealership. So if we know that that's already the case, and now Google is showing even more detailed information about vehicles and trim level and availability and price, we know that Google's showing more. It's not a situation where you think, I just need to do SEO so I can show up better than my competitors. You need to do SEO so you can beat Google, because it's not just about standing out from competitors. You need to give people a reason to go to your site. You need to provide more detailed information than what Google is going to show, and more expertise about the buying process and about the vehicles, so that you not only stand out from your competitors, but you stand out from the free information that customers can get when they're just on Google. So when you're doing SEO, it's about optimizing your digital footprint. It's about beating your competitors. It's about beating Google. And it's about giving those potential customers a better reason to visit your site than just to say, all right, cool, how much does this car cost? So if you've got the same generic boilerplate content that the OEM rolls out to every other brand in the entire country, who really cares? If I'm shopping around and I'm looking for that badass new Bronco, and I live in Dallas where there's 24 dealerships in Dallas, and all 20 dealerships have the exact same generic, super boring, super not unique content all over their site, doesn't really matter to me which dealership I buy from, because they all look exactly the same to me. So your website needs to make it clear to everybody, both humans and Google, why you're awesome, why people should buy from you and not from a competitor. And you want to make sure that your content is actually about your dealership, because so many people have the same generic crap on their site. So make sure your content is actually about you, and make sure it's actually about the local area. And here's a really great way to test it. We use this all the time. Take your homepage, your About Us page, your service department page. Change the name of the dealership and the city that you're located in. If you change both of those, could you take that content and put it on another dealership's website on the other side of the country in a different city? If the content still works, that means it's not really about you and it's not really about the local area. So that's a really easy way to test to see if your content is uniquely about your dealership and relevant to your local area. And here's another important content test. Google wants to see conversational content, which means Google wants to see content that sounds like something that you would say face to face to a customer that just walked in the front door of the dealership. If you're only looking at it, you have your marketing blinders on. and you're using the keywords that you think matter and the jargon that we use in the automotive realm that customers don't necessarily understand and customers don't necessarily think sounds natural. So when you read it out loud, and I'm not talking about just read through it and think about it, I'm talking about physically reading it out loud to another human being who's sitting or standing next to you, you catch those things that don't sound natural. So several years ago, I spoke at a conference in Vegas, and a car dealer saw me and said, "Hey, I'm actually from Dallas. I would love to talk to you about doing SEO with us." And I said, "Sure, let me look at your site. And then when we get back to town, we'll talk." So I looked at their site, and the content on their homepage sounded something like this. "If you want to buy a Ford pickup in Dallas, come to our Ford pickup headquarters, because when you're ready to buy your next Ford pickup, come to our Ford pickup headquarters, where we have the best deals on Ford pickups of anybody in Dallas that sells Ford pickups. So when you're ready to buy that Ford pickup, come to our Ford pickup headquarters and we'll give you the best deal on a Ford pickup of any dealer in Dallas that sells Ford pickups." Now, the guy that wrote that was thinking, "Oh man, we are going to rank so well for Ford pickups in Dallas." But every human that read it was thinking, "What the hell is wrong with these guys?" So when you read that stuff out loud, you catch that. And another thing that happens all the time is people will list out all of the cities where they serve customers. So you go to the homepage of the site and it says, "We also serve customers in Richardson, Plano, Allen, McKinney, Garland, The Colony, Hearst, Euless, Bedford," and it just lists out all these sites. In fact, I talked to a dealership a few weeks ago at a 20 group that had 32 sites listed on the home, or 32 cities listed on the homepage, separated in a comma separated list. And that doesn't mean you're actually going to show up in those cities. It doesn't make you relevant and show up in those cities, in searches in those cities, just because you listed those cities in a comma separated list on your site. If I just walked to the front door of your dealership, you wouldn't say, "Hey, welcome to the dealership. Did you know we also serve customers in Richardson, Plano, Allen, McKinney, Garland, The Colony, Frisco?" No, you wouldn't, because I'm already there. And those customers are already on your site. And Google is already on your site. It doesn't matter. Don't put those comma separated list of cities. It doesn't help with ranking, and it doesn't help with conversational content. And if we boil Google down to a simple concept of pattern detection, there's another way to think about things too. And that's, if you want to show up as a search result when somebody types in a particular search phrase, you need a page of content on your website that's about that concept. Now, it doesn't have to be perfectly keyword to keyword. Google understands that car dealer and car dealership are the same thing. But this is a big problem with a lot of dealerships that want to show up for a lot of fixed ops searches, oil changes, tire rotations, windshield wipers, batteries, yet they don't have a page of content on their website about that. They have one service page with a bullet point list of all the services that they provide, but they don't have any content that says this is what we do. If you don't have a page about that concept, you're not going to show up well in Google. And it's not just about having a page about the concept. That page needs to be the best answer in the local area to the question that the searcher is asking. And it's not just about being the best answer to the question the searcher is asking. It's about answering the question and then answering all of the subsequent questions that that searcher will ask once they get the answer to the first question. And once you've written this awesome content, you need to geo-optimize. You need to optimize the content, but you need to include geographic phrases so that you really target local search results. You want to almost think of Google like a child. Google's very curious. You want to hold Google's hand and really make it obvious what's going on so Google's curious brain understands. So I'm going to walk you through the page elements that you need to optimize when we're talking about the various pages on your site. Most importantly, the title tag. That's what populates the text in the little tab above where you type in the URL. It's also what populates the blue text when you show up as a search result in Google search results. It's the most weighted element on the page. You should never have your dealership name first because you're the only dealership name that. You're always going to rank number one if someone searches for that phrase. So you want to have the targeted keyword phrase and your city and state information. Now, throughout all these elements, make sure it's the same targeted keyword phrase. But title tag, most importantly, keyword phrase and location data. Second most weighted element on the page is the H1 heading. That's the big thick headline above your text. You want to make sure you've got one and only one H1 heading on the page. That H1 heading should have the same keyword phrase in the same city and state. It should be a little bit more conversational and approach it like the heading of a newspaper article. It describes what the page is about. And then obviously you need the same keyword phrase and your location information in the content of the page. But if you're writing content that's truly about your dealership and about the local area, like I just talked about a few minutes ago, you won't really have to do much here because it's already going to be there. And then all of the website platforms allow you to set customized URLs. So always try to include the keyword phrase and the location phrase in the URL for the page. It's more friendly for humans. It's more friendly for Google. The example I like to use is used cars. The default used car page is typically going to be dealership.com/search used or dealership.com/search pre-owned, all one word. You'd be much better off with dealership.com/used cars Dallas TX. Always use dashes to separate your words, include the keyword phrase and the city and state abbreviation. It's also important to include alt text for your images. Now, years ago, it's probably likely that some of you saw me speak at Digital Dealer or NADA or a 20 group. And I would say, hey, look, Google can't tell what's in an image. So alt text is an element in the image embed code that tells the browser to display an image that describes what's in the image, because Google can't see the image, but Google could tell what that description said. Well, now machine learning allows Google to tell pretty much exactly what's in the image, but alt text is still part of the algorithm. So it's an important place to add additional relevancy, especially on the locational side. This is also an accessibility issue. So technically, if you don't have alt text on your images, you are in violation of ADA compliance guidelines, and you can actually get sued by a blind person because the screen reading browser that blind people use to browse the web can't tell what's in the image, but it will read what's in alt text. So if you don't have alt text on an image, you're opening yourself up to a lawsuit. This is already a compliance issue for Honda. It will roll out to the rest of the OEMs because there are starting to be pretty rampant lawsuits. Also, the meta description is important. Now, the meta description does not play in the ranking algorithm, but the meta description populates those couple of gray sentences underneath your blue link when you show up as a search result in Google. So it's really important to optimize the meta description so that it's something compelling. So when you show up as a search result in Google, you'll get more click-throughs to your website. Another big important thing that I always talk to car dealers about is that you want to make sure you're avoiding the automotive jargon that we all use. We use a lot of terms. VDP is a great example. I say VDP, everybody knows exactly what I mean. Somebody that's not a car dealer has no idea what those letters mean. We use jargon. Customers don't use the same phrases. If you optimize around the jargon that we use in automotive, you're not going to catch as much visibility in search results. You want to optimize your site for how your customers are searching for you. Now, there's a video about it there, but my favorite example is most dealers like to say they sell pre-owned vehicles because it just sounds nicer than saying used cars. The problem is customers don't search for pre-owned vehicles. They search for used cars. Using Google's AdWords keyword exploring tool that lets you see approximate monthly search volume for any keyword phrase, if we look at pre-owned vehicles as both pre-space owned, pre-dash owned, and pre-owned all one word, there are approximately 2,900 searches a month for that phrase, while there are 823,000 searches a month for the phrase used cars. So it's really important to optimize for how your customers are going to be looking for you. And in today's world, you absolutely need a blog. It is no longer a luxury. It is an absolute necessity if you want to win. And you need to publish the right kind of posts. Now, having a blog can be important because, again, there's a very major website provider. And heck, you know what? I already called them out before. Let's call them out again. Dealer.com doesn't include a blog unless you pay extra. Every other platform lets you have a blog for free. Doesn't make much sense since a blog is pretty much necessary. It's just a money grab. So if you're going to be on Dealer.com, make sure you're paying the extra to have the blog because you need it. And you want to make sure you're publishing the right kind of posts. A lot of dealerships and a lot of marketing agencies will publish a bunch of crap that won't help you. But the important thing to understand is there's a big difference between the type of content that goes on the main part of your website and the type of content that belongs on your blog that's more informationally focused and not specifically driving immediate sales. And it's very helpful to make your blog a local destination. You want to make your blog something that people will come to read information that's helpful before they're ready to buy. Because if everything on your blog was only about selling cars and selling service, that's a pretty narrow focus on the potential local audience of customers that might buy from you in the future, because you're only going to show up as a search result if somebody is specifically looking to buy or to get serviced right now. So if you make your blog a local destination and share helpful information about the local area, then potentially you'll show up in search results to people that aren't customers and aren't potential customers. But that's not a bad thing, because it's like putting a billboard up on the freeway. People see that billboard every day and they're not qualified customers, but 2 months from now they get in a wreck and they total their car and they need to get a new car, or they need to get their car serviced because it's not totaled. And now you're top of mind because they see your awesome billboard every day. It's the same concept. In fact, for the dealers that we work, half of the blog posts that we publish on the site are about the dealership, and half have nothing to do with the dealership, and they're just about the local area. Now, if you've never done this before or talked about this before or heard me talk about this before, that can be kind of a confusing concept because it seems counterintuitive to put stuff on the site that's not related to selling cars or selling service. So if you need some ideas for what kind of posts you could use, I've done a video that shares 10 ideas that can be springboards that you can use to come up with your own concepts for localized blog posts. Now, one of the things that dealers always want to do is they want to show up in nearby cities, or they're in the suburbs and they want to show up in the main area of the metro. But before you try to expand your reach outside of where you're actually located in the real world, you need to own your own backyard. And basically the concept is this: if you're actually in a city and your address is in that city, but you want to show up somewhere nearby, that means you're trying to out SEO people that actually are located in that other city. If you don't have a solid SEO foundation that lets you dominate search results in your own location, you've got zero hope of outpacing the guys that are in another location. So own your backyard first. Do the right kind of SEO so that you're dominating local search results in your own town, and then expand. Now, if you're in a less competitive market or a rural market where there's just not that many dealers, you could probably do really well with just a few well-created city pages. And there's a video there that explains how to do those. But a lot of you are probably in more competitive markets or a major metro. In that case, a city page isn't going to cut it. You're going to need to go more advanced and use a concept called local content silos. Now, I don't have enough time to go into it because we're just about halfway through. So instead, watch this video. This video walks you through the steps of how to create localized content silos so that you actually have different areas of the site optimized around different cities. So this is pretty much the halfway point. We could end here. Thanks for sticking around to watch the whole thing. That's definitely all the time we've got for today, so you know what that means. Put your hand on the screen right here. We totally just high-fived because you learned something awesome. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next week for another episode of Local Search Tuesdays.